what I want is folks to understand that they have more autonomy and more kind of power in these markets that they're in, both as a market participant when they're trying to get stuff, and as we talked a lot about, as a market designer, the ones, kind of deciding how the market works. Realize that things that they might have thought, oh, it's just based on luck, on chance, that like actually they can do better.
There's times where as companies you create fake scarcity, and I think people are getting a bit fed up with that. What if there was a way for you to design how you do your marketing to be more effective using a tool that most of your competitors have never considered to be something to be used for a competitive advantage? I'm very curious about the conversations that's about to happen with Judd Kessler, who's going to share with us about how to actually be more lucky by design. He's brought over this idea in a book that's just come out with the same name, Lucky by Design, The Hidden Economics of Getting More of What You Want. And we're going to see how the concepts he's uncovered allows us to design markets to be more in our favor, a lot of tools we can use to get the upper hand over our competitors and be a little more effective at getting people to see that we are the product that they want to do business with. Now, Judd, if you're not familiar with, is an inaugural Howard Marks Endowed Professor at the Business of Economics and Public Policy at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. The man is a Harvard graduate as well as an alum from University of Cambridge, where he trained under Nobel laureate Alan E. Roth, founder of Market Design. He has taken these concepts, taken it even further, and he is actually going to be bringing this concept of how to be lucky by design. I'm very excited about this conversation because there's so much for me to learn. Judd, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Right. So I was just telling you that a lot of my listeners are, early stage business, market, maybe getting up to the couple million in the business. And we're all trying to find a way to differentiate, stand out. Market feels to be screaming for attention. And it seems like you've come across an outlier concept that we now can use. And so I'd be curious about how this whole concept came to you as an idea.
Excellent. So I'm an economist. I'm trained as an economist, and the field that the book is embedded in is called market design. And the fundamental kind of way that economists think about markets, and if you've ever taken an econ class, or whether you liked it or not, you may have been subjected to it as a requirement. Economists love prices. We think that prices are what determine who gets what in many markets. And if you've ever heard an economist say supply equals demand, what they're saying is an assertion that price will adjust so that we will allocate our scarce resources to the people willing to pay, and everybody else will be left out. But turns out there's a lot of markets where that is not the case, where price does not fluctuate, does not rise to clear the market. And instead, there are other market rules that decide who gets what. And so, one of the kind of key fundamental things is recognizing that these markets exist. I call them hidden markets in the book. But as a someone starting a business, trying to sell a product, I have there's a few different ways of thinking about how hidden markets can work for you.
When I start hearing about these concepts of supply and demand, one of the first thing that comes to mind is in the age of the internet, using like digital products. That's been a really cool opportunity for people in the last decade, where if you're creating like digital products where you have unlimited supply, it becomes an economic of scaling that's quite new, or at least has been quite profitable over the last decade. Is this one of the opportunities that you explore?
So it's a great, you're kind of bringing me to kind of a set of content that I teach to my MBA students and my executives. But when you are building a product that has very low cost, so you can kind of scale it, that generates lots of opportunities. But of course, you have to be careful with your pricing, because you do not want to price as low as you could, given the possibility of making more profits if you keep your price higher. And one of the things that is underlying the concepts in the book is that there are lots of situations where even in a situation like this, where you could serve everybody you want, right? If it's software or some very low cost service, you could serve everybody. A lot of firms will strategically kind of create scarcity in order to drive demand. So one of the reasons that I describe in hidden markets, the price isn't just going to rise to clear the market, is that there are situations where sellers will intentionally keep prices below what they would otherwise be if they were just gonna maximize profit today. So I'm thinking of things like go to a restaurant and there's a line around the block. Now the restaurant could raise prices, but they choose not to because they potentially want to they want that line. They like the line there. As people walk by, they kind of see, oh, that's a great restaurant, and there's some social proof there where I see other people waiting in line. I think it must be worthwhile. Now, if they go in and pay high prices, right? If that's how the restaurant dealt with it instead, would raise their price until a bunch of people, would want it to go, and everybody else said, no, this is too expensive, right? People would walk by the restaurant, it might be full, but they wouldn't be drawn to it in the same way. They wouldn't say, oh man, there's so many people trying to get in. And you see this in lots of different types of markets. So you see it with restaurants, you see it with live events where the sellers will often keep prices kind of artificially low, and then people are scrambling to get tickets. You see it with fad products. So this summer it was Labubus. It may still be Labubus. I don't know if you're giving me the look that I had. Yeah, you're very fortunate. So this seasons like Beanie Babies, or if you're old as me, like Cabbage Patch Kids. They're Labubus are like small stuffies that people are wearing on their backpacks, and I only heard, I have small kids at home, but they're, kind of too young to be buying these things. But I heard about them because of the massive excess demand for these products. Like people really want them. And the reason I was exposed to them is because I was reading stories saying they're impossible to get. And so, what is great for me as somebody who studies hidden markets is you can see in a situation like that all of the different ways that folks try to get access to these products. You can see them waiting in long lines before retail stores, release them. You can see them kind of on their phones waiting for the exact moment the product will drop so they can click and be the first one to win the race to buy it. And you can see it. I was at a conference in London, and there was at Harrods, there was like a weekly lottery or a raffle to get to buy one. So this is a situation where the sellers have decided, even though the makers of Labubu's, a company called Pop Mart, could produce more, they could raise their prices, but they've chosen not to. And in part, that has fueled additional demand.
I'm a runner, and that's a place where whenever you want to go to one of the major marathons, they make you
Oof.
apply, get through a lottery, and you may and it always blew my mind. What you're saying is you can deliberately design this so that you have at least not only a higher guarantee of selling out your event, but also to change the perception of the value of what your activity is just because you created these lines.
Yeah, so I think that is a strategy. Now, the underlying product has to be good, right? So it has to be something that people, want. But yes, you can create situations where folks kind of get excited about the thing that you're selling because there is a lot of latent demand for it, because it is hard to get, because there are stories about how difficult it is to access it. And then in the case of the marathons, like then it becomes a issue of, all right, what is the way that we are going to decide who gets to participate? So, as the seller, you might say, all right, my main goal is just to kind of create the scarcity and then have there be articles about, how hard it is to get my product or get my service. But then, if you start thinking like, all right, sometimes I do have scarcity. The marathon, there's only so many people in the world marathon majors who can safely run the course on a given day, given that they have to shut down the city for it, and you don't want people like literally on top of each other while they're running. That's not pleasant and a little dangerous. And so then, yeah, they have a bunch of different kind of strategies that folks can use to get in, including entering the lottery multiple years. A lot of people I read about in the book, you can strategically. So if you want to get it to one of these marathons, Jason, you can apply even in years that you don't think you're going to run because they will allow you to defer. So maybe you can't go that year. You should still apply in the lottery. If you win, you defer. And so, there's tricks like that depending on the rules that actually can improve your chances of getting stuff like that.
I'd be curious as you put together the book, if you had in mind a lot more of the sellers that were going to use some of the strategies of hitting markets to be able to maximize their success, or you're trying to give the tools for the buyers to be able to actually win these games, which sometimes are just created out of nothing.
Yeah, it's so funny because I came to it kind of with neither. It was like, I'm an economist. I want to understand the markets. I want to see how they work. And then kind of as I was doing my research and as I was writing, it kind of both of these things came about. Like, here you are, you're a participant in all sorts of markets. I mean, we talked about restaurant reservation, live event tickets, marathon slots, but also, dating markets, labor markets, trying to get your kid into school, trying to get yourself into college, right? All of these different situations where you are in a market that is operating with rules that are not just about kind of whoever's willing to pay gets the thing. And in all of those markets, it would be helpful as somebody who is in the market to kind of understand it, to know how to succeed in them. And then at the same time, it's like I was seeing all of these um, ways that firms were taking advantage of the scarcity that they created. So, sometimes it's to drive demand, but also, some firms benefit from the scarcity in kind of more subtle ways. So, I think a lot about Ticketmaster when I think about this. I mentioned live event tickets, right? They might encourage the sellers that the venues or the artists to price low, create this massive demand of people who want to buy the tickets. Why might they do this? They might do this because when they sell a ticket to you or I at face value, they might they make a little bit in fees, and a lot of people will complain about how big those fees are. But if I turn around, if I buy the ticket as a broker to then turn around and sell it to somebody else, on that sale, Ticketmaster, the fees, at least the ones that I have paid as a buyer, it's like 30% of the ticket price. So, if as a broker, you're selling a ticket that is, say $1,000, you're only getting 700. The Ticketmaster is getting 300 of that sale. So in that case, they've turned the scarcity and they've kind of created another business on the back of it. And you can see this play out in lots of different markets. So there are, as I was doing my research, I saw a bunch of companies in Washington, D.C., where people need to wait in line to get access to see the Supreme Court or to see kind of other government operations take place. They want to be there in person. Right? There are companies that have popped up to be paid line standers, basically create a business that rather than me having to wait, if I'm a high paid lobbyist who wants to see what the Supreme Court justices' faces look like when arguments are made, so I can kind of guess what's going to happen with the case, right? I want to be in the room, but I don't want to have to wait in line for 2 days to be there. So, there's a company that takes advantage of that scarcity by selling the service of paid line stander. And so you can kind of see the businesses that pop up around this scarcity, even if it's not just the seller kind of using it to drive demand.
It's very interesting because what I'm thinking is what's going on here is there's a ton of the companies or individuals such as myself. I mean, I'm a sales guy by heart, and we read books like Influence by Robert Cialdini, and we know the
Oh yeah.
power of scarcity being the highest thing to create. So even as I go back to this digital products, like we all want to do launches, we only have 100 spots left. And I think, there's times where as companies you create fake scarcity, and I think people are getting a bit fed up with that,
Mm.
and you can smell it from a mile away. But I've also seen that you can actually design more scarcity into your product offering so that you actually have legitimate scarcity, and it actually helps you have less stress, more customers, and just a better cycle of cash flow inside of the business. Have you seen a lot of examples where small businesses apply that?
Yeah. So in the book towards the end, I start kind of shifting focus less on you as a market participant and more as you as somebody who kind of runs these hidden markets, designs them. And one of the things that I talk about is this idea of kind of when you design a product, making sure that in fact you are keeping delivering something that's high value, but only at a kind of very high price in and limited in a way that allows you to kind of create that scarcity. So I tell this story again. This is something I teach to my executives, and when I taught full-time MBAs, I taught them this story as well. That in the late '80s and early 1990s, the big airlines created these passes, basically lifetime passes for first class air travel. So you would buy it. It was very, very expensive to buy. It was in over $100,000, sometimes more. And again, in 1980, it looms even larger than it does today. Um, so, you'll pay this price, $250,000, say, but then it gives you the right for first class tickets, basically anywhere you want to go at any time for as long as you live. And there's a bunch of rules that you have to follow. But because it's been so many decades, there are stories about folks who just have gotten got these passes and kind of fly constantly and cost the airlines, $1 million a year just in seats that they can't sell to other people. And so that is a kind of lesson for you as somebody running a business, thinking about, okay, what am I going to offer to my customers? It's like, am I going to offer, unlimited contact with me for a certain retainer, or kind of how am I going to structure what it is that I'm offering? And the lesson there is to just be very careful about how you control your costs to make sure you're not kind of letting your buyers take advantage of what is, essentially a very low price for your time, right? If it's like, you can reach out to me as much as you want, like, some people might respect that. Other people might be texting you about every little thing or emailing you constantly to work on, stuff for them. And so you just have to, be careful in designing your products. But that, of course, lets you be more thoughtful about generating scarcity, because there's nothing more scarce than your own time and attention. And so once you kind of think about it that way, you can start designing the market for your time and attention to really, benefit you, and create that scarcity, because it is scarce. There is scarcity there.
You remind me of we had this marketing meeting about designing product, pricing, all that stuff, and one person did have the proposal being like, "Hey, what if we have this high ticket offer and we have lifetime access, like membership, right?" And as soon as I see that, it's always like, "Oh, that seems like a sexy low hanging fruit." But the amount of times I've seen that being like, "Oh, now we can't innovate on the product because we have to consider the edge case of these customers that we decided to make that offer." So that's a very good one to say, like, as tempting as it seems to offer a lifetime access, we got to be very careful, because
Yeah.
as buyers, like, we're always trying to find a good deal, and we're also kind of trying to cheat the system as
Yeah.
best as we
Yeah.
can. Like, we're very sneaky as
Yeah.
buyers, aren't
Yeah.
we?
Yeah. We are sneaky. I would say, I wanted to say good sellers, but good is I don't want to give it any normative weight here. I have this vivid memory of when I was in high school, I bought a backpack, and I'm pretty sure I want to say it was a JanSport, but that might not be true. So, I'll leave it at that. It was a backpack, and when I bought it, I was told it had a lifetime guarantee. And I was like, "Oh, lifetime guarantee, right?" Of course, then I go in when the zipper breaks, and they say, "Oh, well, we can't fix that. It's out of the warranty." And it's like, "Well, it was a lifetime guarantee." And they're like, "Yes, but that's the lifetime of the product. And as you can see, the product is clearly past its lifetime, because look, the zipper." And I was just like, I thought I had beaten the system here, and the system beat me, right? So, the one of the things that is true, through all of these markets, but I think it becomes particularly true with the thinking about pricing, and particularly thinking about a kind of strategy to create more, unusual or specialty products, is or serve packages, is to just like read the fine print or think carefully about the fine print, because um it's one of those things that, when you are in any situation, but particularly when you're playing in a market that is operating by some set of rules that's not necessarily obvious. Like, when you look at the rules, you actually can figure out, oh, there is a way for me to, do better here. There is a trick that I can use to get what I want. And that's not necessarily going to be obvious to folks who aren't kind of as careful in thinking about, what is in the fine print.
I want to step off the gas of business and go to something a little fun real quick because you did mention that this concept of being lucky by design can even help people in the dating space and how to get lucky finding that special someone. What are we seeing there, and what are some of the advice for people who want to apply some of these concepts in their personal life?
Yeah, I pushed for a little while to have the book be called Get Lucky, but then, they were like, "It's too much, it's too much." I was like, "Alright, Lucky by Design is better." It has design from market design, hidden in there. But yeah, the idea with dating is, it's a hidden market in the sense of we're trying to do allocations. It's not a buyer and a seller. There's people on both sides of the market. So, I call these in the book "choose me" markets because you have to kind of find somebody that you're interested in matching with, um, and the person on the other side has to decide they want to match with you. Now, not everybody is going to be on the dating scene, so I will do what I do in the book, which is draw parallels between dating and labor market, because that is also a choose me market. You're also, as somebody on one side of the market, maybe as an employee trying to find an employer to match with, and the employer is also trying to find an employee that will be a good fit for them. So a lot of the kind of underlying core insights are very similar across the two markets. What are they? Well, one thing that you have to be careful about in both markets is kind of thinking more carefully about what the folks on the other side of the market are actually thinking about, interested in, care about. So, in both cases, if you're a dater being exposed to lots of people, I mean, dating apps give you kind of a flurry of folks that you can be swiping through to kind of get a sense of whether somebody is a good match for you. What and on the labor market, people, reports say there's 250 applicants for each job posting on average. So you have to be much more thoughtful about kind of where you set your bars. So we're used to basically setting a bar that says, if I'm not attracted to this person, I don't find them interesting enough, I'm gonna, swipe left on them and say no. If you are in the labor market, you're used to looking at candidates and saying, okay, they're not qualified, I'm not interested, and say no. But with it being so easy to kind of swipe on folks and it being so easy to apply to jobs, firms and daters have to also start screening out from the top, so to speak, like people that are overqualified for the job, right? You don't want to hire somebody who's just going to be there as a stopgap measure until they find something better, or going to get poached by somebody else, and then you're going to need to, pay them more. Maybe won't be able to afford it. On the dating scene, thinking about that is, maybe less romantic, but it's possible that somebody who is, who you think is very, very appealing, like a lot of people might find that person very, very appealing. So they're going to have a lot of options. And so you're going to kind of, it might be less likely that you are the exact right person for that partner, given all of their available, dating options. And so, in both of those cases, you kind of want to be thoughtful about like, am I screening both people that are not good enough for me or not good enough for my firm? And am I screening people that kind of might be ungettable in some broad sense? Maybe I'm better off kind of finding a set of folks that are the kind of the right band for me. So economists were very, even in the dating world, which this might sound very unromantic, but we think about preferences as being coming from two different places. So there's general preferences, like things that we all agree on, like this person is, classically attractive or has a great job and high social status. Like we all like those things generally, not everybody, but kind of for the most part, there's an average preference for that. So we call those general preferences. And then we have, and this is what makes life interesting, idiosyncratic preferences, things that only we like or that we kind of like, even though it's not what is conventionally considered, attractive or attracting. And so, might be a particular physical type or the way somebody, it's the way somebody looks, the face looks. Could be their hobbies that, the hobbies happen to be the same hobbies as mine. They like running just like you. They like running off road versus, on road, if that's a distinction that matters to you. There are certain movies and media that they like to consume, like there's all sorts of stuff that, that you can't rank them. You can't rank hobbies from best hobbies to worst hobbies overall, but you can rank them for yourself and be like, I don't like going on hikes. I don't want to be with somebody who wants to go on hikes every weekend. And so once you start thinking about your preferences that way, turns out that on the dating market, you have a lot more success if you go after people who you are drawn to because of your idiosyncratic preferences, because that makes for really good matches. And it doesn't have the same problem of like, oh, I like that person because, they're very, very attractive in a conventional way and they have a great job. Like, yeah, well, of course you like them for that reason. Everybody likes them for that reason. Right. And so that's where the competition comes in. But when it's an idiosyncratic reason, well, then there's many fewer people who are going to be kind of drawn to the person that you're drawn to for those features.
Well, Judd, I'm very grateful that the concepts you're bringing forward from an economist's perspective actually feel very similar to some of the things we talk about from a sales and marketing perspective. For those particularly who are trying to find clients and they're like, how am I supposed to compete with the big established companies, the big brands out there? And I'm just getting started. Like, why would people choose me? And a big thing that we advocate a lot and we try to reinforce, because say I'm a coach, say I'm trying to help, and I have this modality, and I'll say I'm a breathwork specialist, right? I lead breathwork sessions, and when I speak to people and they're doing this kind of work, they'll say, "Well, yeah, but what I do can help anyone, so I want to work with everyone." And then it's like, well, why would somebody choose you over someone else? You're in a market where you don't have the experience, you don't have those features or general traits of preference which come with experience, etc. It makes me think about the recommendations we often talk about is like, well, how do you niche down? How do you become more specific on who you want to work with? How do you specialize to saying, hey, I work with, I have one amazing client, or actually a colleague of mine. She does breath work, but she works particularly with Latino women that are going through menopause and want to ease the suffering and regulate their mood swings. And it's so specific that she now stands out so much to that target market. So she now has an unfair advantage in that market. I feel like that's how I would be applying that specific principle. Am I doing this all right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly right. It's definitely one of these situations where, you know, what is it if you're thinking about it from a sales perspective, what is going to be the thing that draws people to you in terms of, your offerings rather than other people's offerings? The flip side of the dating example of you should go after people who have um for whom you have idiosyncratic or specific preferences is also you should advertise yours. You should say, I'm an expert in this niche thing so that people who are looking for that, who want that, can recognize that you are the person. Again, if you think you could secure the whole market, then you don't have to do that. But if you really are in one of these tight markets where there's lots of people in this space, being able to say like, this is my expertise, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who want that expertise who are going to come to you. And then there's other stuff that I think valuable and an opportunity for folks who are just getting started, which is you have something that the bigger firms or the kind of the folks who might be getting more inbound business don't have. And what you have is your ability to like quickly respond to people's requests for things. That like a request comes in and you show that you are incredibly responsive to what it is that they want. And that's something that if you have 100 clients, right, you're barreling through your inbox, you might not be able to send that signal to say like, I am here for you. And that's a case where a lot of clients are going to really value that. And if what they're getting is somebody who specializes in a niche area, or somebody who's like super responsive to them when they need it, that's going to be a differentiator that you have that other people can't replicate.
I want to go back to one of the earlier cases, and when you were speaking about the restaurant lineups, it's so funny because there's one of these restaurants right here in Canggu, here in Bali, uh, called Gigi Susu. Little free plug for them. But every time I drive by this place, it's like a little cafe. It's filled around with people because I think one telenovela or some like soap opera, they ended up going there. So everybody wants to go to that space. Um, I've never eaten there, so I won't comment on the food. And they're right. They're keeping their prices particularly low, and it seems like the hottest spot in town. But there's like a great restaurant across the street that has great food, fair pricing, and is completely empty because they didn't position themselves. They don't have that kind of advantage. And when you speak about somebody who might have a lot of availability, the biggest times that I've seen, even in myself, that I get the least amount of clients is when I have too much time on my hands. I'm almost like too available.
Oh,
And it's like, as soon as I
so
get busy, everybody calls me. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, so I mean that's there's a trade-off. I said you should respond immediately, but there's a trade-off to that, which is if right, what are you signaling when you're responding quickly? You're signaling kind of both the I'm available here for you, I'm prioritizing you, but also like I have nothing to do, no one is interested in hiring me, and that's why I'm available. So, you know, uh that's a tough kind of thing to be. I talk a little bit. I mean, uh if you can do this ethically, I think you can. I talk in the book about folks who are kind of in this situation, a similar situation where what they have found is that acting like their own personal assistant has opened a lot of doors. So when they reach out, if I called a restaurant, it was like, I'd like a reservation. I won't try to say the name of the restaurant.
Gigi
You
Susu.
just Gigi Susu. If I call Gigi Susu and say I'd like a reservation, they might say, no, no, no. Who are you? We're not going to give you a reservation. But if I call and say, yes, hi. I'm the personal assistant to Judd Kessler, and he's interested in trying your restaurant. Could you make a table available at 8 p.m.? Right then, they might say like, "Oh, Judd Kessler." Now they don't, what do they know, right? But the idea is that right, people who are important enough to have personal assistants, people who can afford personal assistants, the authors of the articles that I cite in the book, they say that it opened doors for them because it made people think that they were kind of important enough and valuable enough that it was worth paying them more or giving them access to these scarce resources. So that could be a case where you can be both. You can be very responsive as your own personal assistant, and then also kind of yeah. Jason would love immediately send an email. Jason would love to meet with you. What's your availability to see if we can fit you in, and then you can kind of maybe get both.
On my podcast, I have my staff that manages all the bookings, that works with your team, and it's actually increased the closing rates for getting all the guests on the show just by having someone else that reaches on my behalf because of that perceived um, maturity that comes
Yeah.
from having something like that in place. And so, yeah, I can attest to that. And if you're doing your own personal assistant, you can always have yourself a little pen name as well.
That's right. It's very good that your personal assistant not have the same name or an email address as
It's
you.
ideal.
Yeah. Otherwise that'll get confusing. But yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. I find that for me, um, it's about perception. Like a lot of times when I want to signal that I am personally going to, be engaged in this, relationship. Like if I'm going to be invited to come speak somewhere, and maybe they're going to buy a bunch of books, and I'm going to come give a talk. I will make sure that I respond to some of those emails rather than just have somebody that's helping me do that because I want them to know like I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm not going to be the kind of person who bails at the last minute because something better comes along. Like I'm here. I'm interested in doing this, and you can kind of rely on me. And I think sending an email personally will kind of send that signal. But yes, I guess what would the kids say? You don't want to look thirsty. You don't want to be sending too many
I,
emails.
I feel like the biggest market killer is neediness. Like when
Yeah.
you're a needy seller
Yeah.
or even a needy buyer, then you're in a position to be vulnerable.
Yes. Yes. No. No. It's definitely. But on the dating market, like I think nowadays, when I was young and single, and it was before the apps. It was you were told, "Oh, wait 3 days before you call," kind of really really, don't look interested. And, at some point, sure, when you wanna kind of, create an air of mystique about you. But at some point, if you're interested in somebody, and they're looking, people of my, I'm in my 40s now. So as my friends who remain single continue to play that strategy, it's like, no, people who are dating you want somebody who's going to be interested in them. So if you're interested, like, you don't have to play that game anymore. You can you can see them 2 nights in a row. You can kind of express interest because they're gonna start worrying, if you're so aloof all the time, like, whether you're somebody who wants to settle down and have a family, which might be what daters are looking for. So, again, this is I mean, I think this is a theme throughout the book, which is, a lot of what you have to do to succeed in markets, whether you're competing against other people for, to get something in a market, or you're trying to match with somebody in a market where kind of the goal is to uh, hire them, get them as a client, date them. Right? You have to think a lot more about what those other people in the market are thinking and what they're kind of worried about, what their concerns are about you, or about what's happening in the market for them, and that kind of being putting yourself in their shoes a little bit more is going to help you kind of see the markets that you're in and that you're controlling a little bit better, and succeed.
Well, I am very happy we have at least a blueprint now to recognize what hidden markets exist. And we've used that term a couple of times. I almost feel like I'd love to end on maybe define some of the most common hidden markets, because if we're switching from, hey, okay, these are things that you can use as tactics to be more effective in business, but we're very likely going to be encountering these hidden markets as buyers more frequently. So I'm wondering if you have a 101 defense against the dark arts of conscious manipulators of hidden markets. Maybe, like, what are the ones we often encounter, and what are some of the ways that we can poke at it so that we can be like, hey, we don't need to fall into this designed hidden market where it's actually designed to just squeeze more money out of me.
Yeah. So I would say my definition of hidden market is when there's scarcity, when there's more, either, and it could be real scarcity or it could be artificial scarcity, but there's more people who want something than there are, um, you know goods or services to serve everybody, and the price is not rising. That once you're in that situation, you're in a hidden market. And I should say, when you ask about common hidden markets, a lot of hidden markets that you play in are markets where there is no price. Like, the government is giving away a benefit, like spots in public schools, or there's certain medical care where it's like life-saving organ transplants that you can't buy them. So there's lots of situations where there'll be no price. So I want to flag that, even though we've been talking about a lot of hidden markets where there is a price and it's just too low. But that's a hidden market. It's when you have to figure out what the rules are to get what it is that you want. It's not as simple as just showing up and saying, "I'd like to buy it at a certain price." And then the second thing to do, the way to succeed in these, is to kind of understand what the rules are that are underlying the market. And I said you have to read the fine print, but there's a first thing you can do, which is just look at the markets, and you're familiar because you play in them all the time. You're familiar with what these markets look like. They're first come, first serve races where it's the first person to click and buy something or claim something, when the moment they're released. There are first come, first serve lines where you have to stand in line. We talked about those. There's also waiting lists where you don't have to stand in line, but you have to kind of get your name down. And then, the earlier you get your name down, the better. Then there's markets that use randomization with lotteries. There are markets which we didn't really talk about, but are out there where you have to rank your preferences, kind of decide what it is that you want, and kind of rank it from best to worst. And then there's the choose me markets where you're playing, trying to match with somebody on the other side. And so, seeing which type of market that you're in, that is the important second step of kind of, you're in a hidden market, you recognize it. What kind of market is it that you're in? And then the third step, and this is something that is in the book, but it's just kind of something you can, once you have a framework for thinking about it, you can do better, is, what is the optimal strategy to play in these markets? And we talked about dating markets, labor markets, kind of these two-sided choose me markets. We talked a little bit about kind of lotteries and waiting in line. And those have, kind of different strategies that you can play, but there's always a way to kind of make it work better for yourself. And so that's the set of steps: is identify that the hidden market exists, figure out its rules, and then figure out your strategy and get lucky by design.
Judd, this has been a really fun conversation. I I talk a lot about selling with love. That's usually the topic that I get very excited. That's the book I wrote. But what I'd love to kind of switch as a final question to you is,
Yeah.
in what ways would you love people to apply your book, and in what ways would you be disappointed in people applying your concepts?
So I I don't think I would be disappointed. I mean, I think, what I want is folks to understand that they have more autonomy and more kind of power in these markets that they're in, both as a market participant when they're trying to get stuff, and as we talked a lot about, as a market designer, the ones, kind of deciding how the market works. And so I want folks to feel empowered about their role in those markets, and realize that things that they might have thought, oh, it's just based on luck, on chance, that like actually they can do better. And so, I would like them to get things that they want, but even if they just kind of feel more empowered as they go through uh, the world, that'll be a win for me.
Awesome. And I'm going to fill the gap and say, please don't use this book to completely manipulate, distort, and take vicious advantage
No,
of people.
I I mean, it's not in the book. If you're looking for ways of taking advantage of people, you're not going to find it in the book. But yes, I guess any insights could be used for good or evil. I prefer people use them for good.
You're with a good audience here. That's why I can say this tongue in cheek. Judd, it's been a pleasure having this chat with you. Thank you for bringing these concepts to light. For me, it gets me to think a lot about how to design and just be conscious that these hidden markets have a very big power. And
Yeah.
especially for me, I work in an industry where we have a lot of digital products. Sometimes you can design something without scarcity, but it actually sometimes doesn't create the demand you're looking for or the urge for people to take an action. And so when we design things with the scarcity in mind, so for example, having start dates for things that we do so that it gets people at least motivated to take action, because inertia is one powerful force. And I think here you've given me a lot of ideas that we can apply this so that if we're doing something, we're selling a product that at the end of the day brings more value than what we ask in return, then we should use concepts like this to be able to get people to do some big decisions that'll make their lives better. Judd, thank you so much. For everybody tuning in, Lucky by Design has just released, so the hidden economics of getting more of what you want. We'll put a link into the book so you guys can grab yourself a copy. And again, Judd, thank you so much for your time, wisdom, and energy on this show.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to the Jason Marc Campbell Business Podcast. If you enjoyed that episode and you want to dig deeper into other topics, we have some more episodes that we've linked here. Some of them are related to sales, other on business, and even some on being more productive at work. Whatever it is you're interested in, we have so many episodes that are being listed on this channel. So please dig in, enjoy, and of course, keep selling with love.